what?
If you allow me, there's a lot of people watching us right now, on Twitter, on Rumble, on YouTube, on all these different things. And a lot of them are both Jewish and not Jewish. They're uninitiated. So if maybe you or Frank or both of you guys could tell just what is this thing called the Erev Rav? What is this entity? Who are these people?
Oh, okay.
What are they?
Who they are is in Jewish history, in Genesis and Exodus. What they are is Moses was a very flawed man. That's what we don't hear from rabbis that come out of European tradition. This is a huge discussion about European Judaism, but we'll set that aside for now. We're going back to source, right? In Torah, it says that when Moses was the prince of Egypt. You know that, right? He was a prince of Egypt. He was raised in Pharaoh's home. He was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, and his nanny was his own sister, Miriam, that was Pharaoh's daughter's assistant. But anyway, because Moses was raised there, he was unlike other Jews, unless they worked, as maids or what have you for Pharaoh, because there was a lot of jobs in that, that was where the money was. But there were a lot of people of Jewish background who ascended to power under Pharaoh, and they were his professors, his lawyers, his doctors, his advisors, his courtiers, the people who ran things. And they also intermarried with him. That's why they were called the mixed multitude, because they intermarried with Pharaoh. They keep obscuring that, but that's the absolute fact. They intermarried into the tippy top of the system of slavery, feudalism. And God told Moses, don't take them out. Leave them where they are, because, they also practiced the Babylonian stuff with Pharaoh. And you're going to be free of all of that. You're walking out of that. You're walking out of your firstborn being sacrificed by Pharaoh. You don't want that no more. That's why Moses was alive, because he escaped that judgment where the firstborn male of all Jewish homes was sacrificed by Pharaoh to make the sun come up, or whatever the many reasons they sacrificed children, including their own. But God told him, don't take them out. They can't change. And Moses argued with God and said, how can you say that? As did Abraham. That's a whole other thing. But God said, because they can't change, because they're accustomed to slavery. They like it. They like the system of slavery. They like being on top. They like being leaders. They like all the trappings of that and what goes along with it, which is basically lying to people. They're okay with it. Don't take them out. They can't change. Moses said, but you yourself say that any heart can approach you. Any heart can be redeemed. You yourself say that. So how can you then turn around and say they can't change? And God said, because they can't, because they are in the system of slavery. They were never slaves. Or it's so far past in the dim mists before they took on this DNA that has been inbred for thousands and thousands of years, because how they created a king was a brother and a sister mated, and that's how they created kings in the royal world forever. Then they changed it to cousins, and that happened in Hawaii too, but we'll go into that. That's the ultimate taboo. But anyway, so Moses argued till God got tired, and he said, okay, look, screw around and find out. Go ahead, have it your way. Well, the Erev Rav, they were called the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav, he took them out, and they were the death of Moses. They were responsible for every single horrible thing that befell the escaping slaves. The first thing they did was they were jealous of Moses, so they attacked the children and the old people. That's the first thing they did. They attacked on the weakest flank, and that is their characteristic. They attacked the weak. And the second thing they did was when Moses was 2 minutes late coming down from the mountain, is they built the golden calf of Horus for the people to go back to Babylonian worship, which is the bull stock market, if you want to break it down. And Moses said, God said, let me get rid of them. And Moses again came in and said, no, no, no. So it ends up that they are the death of Moses and the reason that not even a drop of his blood could enter the promised land. So that's a lot to digest if you understand what's being told there. And they are also responsible for every horror that befalls us, because they always represent that they are us when they're not. They always speak for us when they don't. Their goal is always to unite with Amalek, who, Pharaoh, to destroy us. They don't want us to have self-determination or any safe place on earth. They hate that. They hate that because we are the dichotomy. The Jews are the dichotomy of the world that doesn't fit into anybody's box, because that's who we are. That's what we were put here for. We are the dichotomy, and the Western world is so confused in that dichotomy that they actually believe that you must hate the Jews in order to truly love them. And I mean, if that isn't godly at all.
What we see
You know?
with the Anti-Defamation League, for example, right now,
Oh, I'm declaring myself the de facto head of the Anti-Defamation League. I have totally defined anti-Semitism, and it's nothing like what they say. It is not an arm of the Democratic Party, which is totally anti-Semitic, and we all know it. I was even arguing with Bill Maher last night about it, because he's a big Dem, and he admitted that the anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party is off the charts, and he can't stand it either. The anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-everything that we do. These people, they don't even know that part of their psychosis is that they can never, ever see goodness in the Jewish people. They're blinded from it. They believe we are demonic and that our God is demonic too. And yet they go around talking about love. Yeah. I mean, this is the Great Awakening. For what you say, when you say one thing and do another. That is a duality that was created by the snake, because it takes you down the wrong path. It doesn't lead to the heart. It doesn't lead to connection. It doesn't do any of that. It's a blood cult. And the Jews have problems there too that need to be rectified. But if we are going to have rectification, redemption, and a reboot, it all starts with awareness. And we should not be afraid to challenge our own perceptions and where they get us.
Could I address some of the points you made about the Erev Rav?
But yeah,
But first, I'm going to stick up for Moses for a second here. All right.
Go for it.
All right. So true, Moses was a flawed person, but only because he was a human being. And
right.
If Moses was flawed, then boy, are we in trouble. All right. Because he was I'll just leave it at that. But the reason why
Moses had too many liberal characteristics that ended up being the death of him.
I'll tell you what that was about.
Okay.
So Moses, if there was a person who was ever interested in doing God's will and what he knew God wanted, it was Moses. So Moses understood that God was a person who grows consciousnesses. He wants to have relationships with another, right? That's what human consciousness is. And so consciousness needs to develop and mature. It has to grow. Not every consciousness grows at the same rate, but ultimately, Moses knows that God wants everybody to graduate. He wants every consciousness to fully ripen and mature. So he understood that the souls of the Erev Rav, who that God wanted them very, very much too, because there's obviously something to them. If
Well,
God
then why did God tell Moses not to take them out?
He didn't tell him. He said, actually, in the Midrash, what it says is, I don't recommend you do it. I'm not forbidding you, but I don't recommend that you do it because these consciousnesses are not mature enough yet. And it was a mistake. I agree with you, but Moses, it seems to be that he made a mistake.
It was a mistake. I'm glad you said that, because it definitely is a mistake in any movement for justice against slavery that you include slavers.
Exactly.
Idea.
Right. So who are, I just wanted to say who, I wanted to clarify who the Erev Rav really were. There may have been a little bit of intermarriage from the Israelite tribes with the Egyptian aristocracy, but very, very, very minimal, because generally the Egyptian aristocracy looked at the Israelites like cattle. They were disgusted. Not only were they disgusted, they were primarily disgusted, as it says in the text, but by their cultural habits, by the fact that they would even consider eating a sheep or a ram or a goat. Like, that was disgusting to them. And they found, Israelites in general kind of like yuck. So there wasn't a lot of intermarriage, but some significant portion of the Egyptian priesthood / aristocracy / firstborn, that's all the same thing, were affected by what I call Josephism.
That's right.
Josephism is what Judaism was at his time. So anything Jewish, anything godly, any teaching of Jacob or Abraham that affected Egyptians came from Joseph's influence. And so those people were the ones who were they were the least revolted with the Israelites. However, they still looked at the Israelites as from a shtetl. They're basically they saw themselves when they went out with Egypt as, they're like, obviously we have to lead these people. We are the Egyptians, not the Egyptian Erev Rav, right? That's what they are. They're like, the Israelites need us. They need our guidance. They need us to control them. They need us because they look at them. They're just they're slaves. They're peasants. They don't know what they're doing. Obviously, we're sophisticated. We know science. We know culture. We understand philosophy. But what they didn't understand, and this is why, ultimately why God didn't want them to come along, is that they understood a lot, but not the most important thing.
Right.
The most important thing is that they reached the pinnacle of human intellect and of understanding of the universe. But to serve God, you have to understand that's not adequate. You have to transcend your intellect and what you understand and what you're satisfied with, and accept God's will based on faith. This is what they could not do. They were intellectuals, they were smart, they were useful, and Moses rightfully saw their value, and that one day when they graduate, when their consciousness blossoms and they understand the importance of having faith in an incomprehensible God.
I was just gonna say, based on Franklin was saying. So if you look today, you look at there's all these not only ADL, a bunch of them, and they look at people like people who look like Frank and also myself to some extent as they look at Orthodox Jews or Hasidic Jews as like they're kind of like, I'll say it, like they're kind of like unwashed cousin, And
I got a kind of a caveman thing happening.
They look at Christians that way too, and Muslims. They look at people who have belief not in them, but in something higher, as just the great unwashed.
Yeah.
The icky people.
And they speak for, and they try to speak for us, J Street, we speak for all Jews. We're Jewish thought leaders. You see their articles in the the forward, and they proceed to speak for everybody who lives in Orthodox communities. Like we don't need.
Well, they just all get paid from the Democrats. That's the real deal. And some of them get paid from the Republicans too, because the
Torah, Jewish equals Torah. Torah equals Jewish. ADL doesn't like Torah. They're not Jewish. End of story. It's a very, very simple equation. Super simple. I wish people knew it. I wish people could understand that. So
also it's also they adhere to very kind of opposite of Judaism stuff.
Well, I mean, I think I always say that they have the wrong religion, because a lot of the time you'll hear from them, turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. I mean, listen, it's a Christian concept. If you look at the Talmud, somebody's trying to come to kill you, you rise up and you preempt them. Ironically, this is what the Israeli army did in 67, even though the leaders were anti-religious and all the rest of it, but we preempted our enemies. We did kind of the same thing in 73, not to a lesser extent, but since then we haven't really followed the Torah and how we wage war, how we run our economy. I don't know what we're following. I mean, like these people, I always tell them, I'm like, you guys are the wrong religion.
We're following, them, and they are, they are hooked up with a system which uses us as its collateral damage.
Yeah. Can I read something really
Am I
quick?
right?
No.
They trade in Jewish lives, and they always have, because they say, oh, we represent the Jewish community, so that's worth this much. But a whole bunch of us always die on account of it. But
usually guys that look like me, because when people think Jewish, they think
they never die.
They don't die because they don't look like this. Yeah. So they say something, somebody thinks I'm associated with them because I have a Jewish look, and then anyway, that's how it is. That's how it's been.
Can I read something very, very short?
The plan that they would get rid of, they'll get rid of believers, because that gets in the way of their artificial intelligence, which they love. They love that, because that's them being God. They can be
that's the resurrection of the serpent in fully materialized in the world. But
right.
Can I read something?
They do take those vows to slavery, a slave system of debt, slavery, and all that. They're often holding it up and involved in some kind of horrible money laundering stuff. I mean, look at Epstein. Look at these people. Yeah. And where are we? We don't say anything. But it is awful, and they are going to go down, because Torah says that the day of the Erev Rav will end, and it's now in the Messianic age. The Erev Rav will be exposed, and they will go down, and the people who are connected to God will not go down. And I think I see it every day. I see them like everybody who thought they had control in them. Not everybody, but many who thought they had control over the stories about that they could use their stuff in the media to squash these stories about child trafficking, and then they all get exposed and arrested for child porn. Come on, man, witness it. It's happening every day, and it's hilarious and great. I gotta say this. Sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna interrupt everyone. That's why you're a miracle, because I try to talk about this kind of stuff, and they immediately kick me off of Twitter, immediately, like permanently, okay, or anything, right? And Orthodox Jews, they don't actually have a voice to the public at all right? No.
So, and the moment we do,
no believers of any sort do.
Yeah. So everybody who says everything contrary to Torah, they have unlimited airtime, unlimited. One guy for 1 second, a tiny peep, he's dead or thrown off. That's the reality. That's why you're a miracle. You're kind of like our Trump. I'm saying the Trump of the Jews, because how did he get by? How did he slip by that system? Those slimy bastards, right? He grew up with them somehow. Somehow he slipped through under their noses, and that's kind of like what you're like.
Frank,
I think it's like I always thought, well, they're not that smart they're not that hard to outsmart.
It's true. They're not that bright.
And they do it themselves. We don't even have to do nothing. That's what God says. You don't have to take any action. Just don't add to their power. Don't speak evil tongue on them. Don't do anything. They'll do it themselves, because they're infected with the arrogance and ignorance bacteria that undoes them in front of you. Just witness it. You don't have to do nothing. Just don't prop them up, and don't feed them, and don't quote them. Don't give them no energy. Just let them fall like Babylon. They're part of that, and this is the end of it. this is the age where all that goes, and only, I think God is, I think that something so good is going to remain after this war we're in. And the more we do to fix ourselves and remove Satan from our hearts and love for no reason, just love for no reason instead of hate for no reason, boy, it's going to change big. And I think that a big financial change is coming. And I think the world is on the verge of just a great time coming, as God told us in Torah would happen once the nation returned to its own land. That's what God told us, and I see it happening. Of course, we got to get rid of a lot of, people who don't mean well for us that are among us. They don't mean well for us. They start wars with, the wars are hard to start, and peace is easy if you really look at it clearly.
Yeah. They're trying so hard to ignite this whole Ukraine thing. It's crazy. It's like.
I just want to say one thing, Roseanne. The Rebbe, I don't know if you know who. So Rebbe Kahana, obviously Rebbe Meir Kahana, his
Of course. Are you kidding? Of course, I know every word. Are you kidding?
So his grandson, I think 4 years ago, his name is Rebbe Meir Ettinger. He was a young guy when he was arrested. I think he was like 17 years old. He was was put in administrative detention by the Israeli government. And I just want to read a very short thing that he wrote.
Well, do you know that the Israeli government on the left was very Obama-sized, just like our country, and so they're just throwing it off now.
Yeah,
as we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, so he wrote this really, this is before this government, this new, so to speak, religious government got elected. He wrote, in the current Jewish state, there is complete democratic freedom for all sorts of crazy ideas, except for Judaism alone, which is declared illegal. In Israel today, the Torah's solution to security problems is racist. The Torah's views on international relations are incitement, and anyone who supports the Torah's opinion over the laws of the state is an anarchist. Those who struggle with love for the land of Israel are arrested and their homes are destroyed. In the state of Israel today, we have leaders who do not understand the Torah, and no one dares explain to them what a true Jewish state looks like, why the Jewish people are in the land of Israel, and what right the Jewish people have to the land. Not only are we victims of this unfortunate situation, but you are too. You, the judge and the prosecutor. All of us are captives of this reality. Each of us has a godly soul that wants to live a Jewish life, and we all feel alone in our opposition to the state. This is what he said in court when he was in court, under administrative detention. And it was like his opening statement. This is like a 17-year-old kid at the time talking. This guy was like, he's a genius, and so now we have this government. And people went and rioted. Listen, I'm no fan of a lot of these guys in the Knesset, but I met the guy who's trying to do judicial reform in Israel, Simcha Rothman, and I think he has this. His intentions. He's a good guy. His intentions are good. He has his head in the right place, but you see, these people are just, they went in and rioted, and they see that their end is near. All these. Listen, it's not everybody in Tel Aviv, but the Tel Aviv type, I call it, and it's
Obama Jews.
Yeah, and it's all coming to a head now. Israel is like the tip of the spear of all this stuff, and
but if you notice, boy, people there are really waking up to it and seeing where it leads, and it does lead to it's going to lead to a complete police state, which has nothing to do with Judaism. The last thing on earth it has to do with is Judaism.
When I flew back to Israel during COVID, one of my trips back to Israel, and of course I didn't inject myself, and you have to declare before you land or before you take off whether or not you've injected yourself.
Well, that's the point I'm making, is that they use our lives as their collateral damage, where they took all that right to the Jewish people. And it was amazing to me and to women I talked to who were survivors of the Holocaust that said, look how easily they line up and bring their children to take this from a guy with a German accent that goes, you will take this shot. You will go to the showers. And, so easily, as if there was no memory in their heads of their own history and what happened. It's terrifying, but that's where we are.
Well, speaking of Erev Rav, all the Holocaust education organizations, they only show you the result. They don't show you what led up to,
They also don't show you what the main lesson is and what the solution is. They don't talk about self-defense at all. They don't, they actually the main
Well,
lesson.
they make self-defense illegal, as they're trying to do here.
Exactly.
We have been led astray by people who don't like us. They want us dead. All of us, not just the Jews, but all believers who, you know what belief is? This is deep Torah too. Belief is memory and connection. And they don't like that.
They do not. I noticed that too. Not huge fans of it. Yeah. So.
Because deep in our memory is our source. Deep, deep down there is our source.
So how do we combat this whole thing?
That's something I have to say this because you touched upon the main thing. Earlier you said, well, how are we going to rectify the Erev Rav, right? And you mentioned the method. The method is what you mentioned, the mathematical aspect of the Hebrew scripture, the mathematical code and all the information that's encoded within that can only really be exposed in our generation because of the technology that God allowed us to have.
Right.
And because these people, who are they? Rob, we mentioned before, they're intellectual. They reach the limit of human intellect. They love math, and it's only the mathematical aspect, the perfection of the Torah, of the document of the Hebrew scripture, that will make them understand that this could only have been manufactured, the Hebrew scripture, by the creator of existence. And people might be wondering, what are we talking about? But we'd have to have a whole separate thing to show some examples of.
Well, one good example is the word Eretz, which means land, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But coded within the word Eretz is actually numerically the exact weight of the earth. Exact.
Aleph, Resh, 201, Tzadik, 281. Yeah.
I'll send you the video that explains it.
Right.
And
it's gonna have to be like a logarithmic expression,
yes.
but I think I know what you're talking about. Right.
Yeah, and in every letter is a number, and every letter number is a frequency, a sound, a musical note, and a lot of other things too. Now, how could that be? Who made that up?
God. Only God could have done that. Only the creator.
And that it's always true every time. It doesn't happen sometimes and not others.
Every time.
Always happens because that's science. It always happens. If you always multiply these certain numbers, it always comes out to the same thing.
That's right.
Like, did you know that the day we received Torah was pi?
Yep. That's right.
314. I mean, it's just, we're too dumb to get any of it. But if we can get
some of it, God made it. God did that on purpose.
I know.
He did it so we can see it and appreciate it.
But we have to be able to be aware of it, and that's where we fall short, because our awareness is, oh, what's Kim Kardashian's butt look like today? They make us distracted, but I mean, these are the miracles and the unceasing miracles of life. They don't want us to look at all. They want us to, be filled with hate and fear and, lower chakra chakra concerns. Torah says the downfall of the Jewish man is bad food and loose women. Boy, is that right. Every one of these Erev Rav eats bad food and has a, attraction to loose
I think that's
women.
just the general downfall of all men, but yeah.
They're not crashing down my door to get married.
Roseanne, my grandmother
believe
is 89 years old, and
Huh?
my grandmother is 89 years old, and as we say in Russian, she's a very interesting looking lady, and if somebody asked her to marry her, she still probably would, or she's still like, preparing herself for that.
She is. So it's my mom. She's 89 also, and she always has to put on her makeup and do her hair for Shabbat dinner, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mom, you've already killed 3 men. That's enough.
Rabbi Nachman said to a group of his disciples who they were getting on in age, and he saw that they kind of start to feel like old guys, and he said, it's something you need to understand. There's no such thing as old men, and obviously there's no such thing as old women. We're all these eternal beings, and the rapper might get a little old, but we are ageless in reality. We're all.
Yeah.
Well, Torah is ageless. I know that much. It sure is. And I think it's about to be relaunched into a better time where people will be more, will understand more levels of it rather than the thing that we've been kind of led by some Erev Rav rabbis to think, because it's not none of that. It ain't.
Yeah.
They were forced to go and be slaves to Rome and change it. They were forced, and they did change they changed some in the translation that they shouldn't have, that they did out of ignorance. But that's what I think is the whole Golem of Prague story. And, I went to Prague to study the Golem of Prague and what the Maharal was really saying. But that's a whole other subject. But that's really about the Erev Rav, and we should do a whole show on that another time. Sure. But today we're just coming with an open consciousness for God to show us where we need to improve in our own spirit and our own soul. These next days that God's gonna take us by the hand and lovingly smack us upside the head so we can get straight.